All right, welcome again. And we're starting with chapter 13, the divine name today, finishing our book study. And we'll begin with meditation as usual. So first take a moment and get settled. Allow the body to get settled and find stillness. And allow the mind similarly to get settled and find stillness. And rest into and as the presence of awareness without referring to any images, ideas, feelings, perceptions, just resting as that presence of awareness, the I am. And just notice the quality of your presence. When your self isn't referring to any past or future, and it isn't colored by any experience. Notice that I am. For just another few moments, just rest there as that presence of awareness. Let's call this presence I am. Remembering and witnessing how it's prior to and not dependent upon any other piece of our experience. And as we begin to, in a sense, welcome back in the world, turn our attention towards the body and our ideas and what happens with the mind, as best you can, stay with that I. Welcome experience, but as best you can, don't call it I. Let's begin to deepen the breath, turning our attention back to the body. Noticing light filtering through the eyelids. Feeling the chair underneath of you, and in the midst of that, stay with the I. Prior to and not dependent upon these experiences, but welcoming them nonetheless. And begin to slowly open your eyes. And as always, open to shares. If there's anything to share from the meditation.
I had an interesting sensation in my head, just really focusing on the I as you were instructing. I had a lot of pressure here, and then my back of my head was tingling. And I don't get that all the time,
Yeah.
really, but I think when it's really grounding into what you were saying, and I appreciate that meditation a lot. So thank you.
Mm. Beautiful. It was a deep one for me as well. I feel like I blipped out, or like I blipped out of time, really. Like at some point there was the awareness of coming back to time, and I was like, I am leading a meditation right now. Like, I haven't spoken in a while. I don't know if that was a minute, might have been like 10 minutes. I don't think it was that long, but there was really like the I went to a timeless place. So it was neat.
Yeah, me too, actually. It was noticeably deep.
That's so cool. I had the inclination or thought. I was like, we're going deep. And I was like, I don't know if that's a projection or that's neat.
Timeless awareness.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Did you want to say more, William?
Oh, just add this out in time and space, this interesting little I don't know what to call it, but thing of imagery. Where I'm not sure if you've ever stayed really still in cold water, and so still that your body actually creates a very small layer of warmth around it.
Yeah.
And if you move, you become cold, but if you stay still, you're kind of
Insulated
in that warmth.
Yeah.
And in that stillness, I felt insulated from experience in an analogous manner.
That's a neat metaphor. Yeah, that's really interesting because it kind of matches like an experience that I've had similarly, that like, yeah, like once I was realizing, oh, it seems like it's been a while, maybe I should say a thing. And then there was like words that came, and then it felt like, kind of similar, oh, now there's the cold water or something. Like it felt like stillness was kind of dispersed for a moment and then, okay, it settled back in. Yeah, that's a neat metaphor. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Groovy.
Yeah. Mhm.
Begin the reading. Okay, we have 4 sections today, so we each get one. Anybody prefer to go first?
I'm happy to read.
Great, thanks.
Chapter 13, the Divine Name. The knowledge I am, or the feeling of being myself, is a hint of the beloved. It is the perfume of God's presence in the heart. To give oneself entirely to the I am is to lose oneself in God's presence. This loss of one's apparent self in God's presence is the ultimate surrender. As the Sufi mystic Bayezid Bastami said, forgetfulness of self is remembrance of God. Prior to creation, God must be and God must know. More accurately, God signifies the knowing of being prior to form. In fact, prior to creation, there is no prior. The common name for the knowing of being is I, for I is the name that whatever knows itself gives to itself. If God were to give himself a name, he would call himself I. Thus, the name I is the first form of God. It is the divine name. It is the name of the nameless. It is the first utterance as infinite being emerges from the formless into form. I is the logos, or word, which before it is uttered is God's unmanifest intelligence. Once named, it is the portal through which manifestation is ushered. Krishnamurti referred to this as the first and last freedom. It is the portal through which the separate self reclaims its freedom from the tyranny of experience, and the same portal through which infinite being travels in the opposite direction as it passes out of eternity into time, foregoing its freedom in favor of experience. As Jesus says, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved. The name I is the doorway through which the finite mind passes as it is divested of the limitations it acquires from experience and is returned to its natural condition of peace and joy. I is the divine name, and each of us calls ourselves I. God has given us his name to remind us that our self is his self, infinite, intimate, impersonal being, the only self there is, the self of all selves, the being in all existence. Know that each of our individual names is one of the many names of God's infinite being. That is why it is called a Christian name, is the name of Christ in us. When we hear our name called, we say, yes, I'm here. In that moment, the sound of our name draws our attention to pure being, to the experience I am, before it is colored by experience. God's presence shines briefly in us, for it acquires an attribute and seems to become a person.
Let's discuss.
The Sufi quote is kind of what I was trying to expresses like a question in our last session, but I think I made an abysmal mess of it. Forgetfulness of self is remembrance of God. I posed the question, do you think while we're relinquishing being something, God is relinquishing being everything? And if you switch relinquish for forget, it's the same shape of notion.
Yeah.
So us remembering who we are as God, forgetting who He is.
Mm-hmm. I think he even refers to that later. Maybe it wasn't what you just read. Oh yeah, I think it isn't what you just read. I just didn't make the same connection I did as you were reading as when I read it through before. Yeah, the same portal. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and one thing I've learned through Walter Russell, through Aaron, through Walter Russell, is he says there's two impulses. Is that right, Aaron? I have it.
Mm-hmm.
Or two desires, something like that, to be informed, to be something and to be everything. Wait, how does it go? I know it, but I don't remember the words.
To
Something like to
manifest God's infinite idea, so to come into form, but to also be its true self, which is infinite and not in form.
Yeah.
So we're in the
cool.
realm of paradox,
Yeah.
and paradox between impulses, which is why I find this notion of balance and Ra particularly important, because the balance of dual impulses and ideas kind of reverberates through reality.
Yeah.
And I think the more we kind of practice contemplating such inverses and balances, the more we perhaps become practiced around embodying the center point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I experienced that too.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the
Carolyn.
open mind. I'll be quick. The open mind doesn't like object to paradox or something. Like when two seemingly opposing things are simultaneously true. Like, oh yeah, okay, got it. That's cool to me.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, Carolyn, your what you reported about your experience of feeling sensation up here, this territory we're at right now, the paradox, the movement from infinity into form and then from form back into infinity, that's all about this. Yeah. It's all about the sixth ray. It's all about the indigo. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting to me that you were feeling sensation there. I mean, it doesn't feel like a coincidence at all.
Yeah. It's like a pressure, and I get the tingling, but the pressure was there. I was somehow drawn, I don't know if this is where the connection is, but in the talk about the I and the first form of God, the opening line, I think it's in the book of Matthew in the New Testament, is in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word is God. And they don't use the I directly, but it just reminds me like how powerful the throat chakra is in terms of our embodying our divinity. The word is powerful to state, declare to the infinite universe, I am, reverberates energetically through all time and space. It is very powerful. So I was just kind of remembering that particular quote from the New Testament, which I find so beautiful as I devour the New Testament through the eyes of Christ consciousness as opposed to ego. Very symbolic. And he says, I is the logos or word, which before it is uttered. So that also goes back to the statement William was reading about prior to creation, there is no prior.
Mm.
There is no before that. I was struck with the page 114, the Krishnamurti quote there, the first and last freedom. And I've never had a pointer that led to this particular thought, I suppose, the portal through which the separate self reclaims its freedom from, and he uses the word tyranny of experience. And I've never thought of experience in the same breath or whatnot as tyranny. I always thought of tyranny as something very different. And the same portal through which infinite being travels in the opposite direction. It's like I can go around the world, I'm going to come back and see the back of my head. You know, it's just like this infinite. I just kept seeing this infinite loop as I read that, you know, the image in my mind, in which infinite being travels in the opposite direction as it passes out of eternity into time.
Mm-hmm.
I was remembering too that when I was little, it was real scary in the human condition to think of myself as this little bitty nothing in this big giant universe.
Yeah.
And the beautiful understanding, and he brings this to light for me. I am not this little speck of dust on this infinite plane. I am everything on this infinite plane. And so I kind of got that remembrance as well from that paragraph, but I really like that quote, and I hadn't heard it before, the first and last freedom. Really struck me.
Yeah. Yeah, that paragraph also reminds me of excerpts from, I can't remember Nisargadatta's book, the name of his book, but there's this podcast on Spotify where a woman reads from different mystics, and she's reading from Nisargadatta in one of these, and it's one that I've listened to over and over, and I think it's his most well known. I think it's something like I am or something. I can't remember what it's called. I am that. Okay. But yeah, it's this, he's saying the same thing, and he talks about sort of like riding the I am, like stay with the I am, it'll take you all the way to the absolute, you know, just keep riding that I am, watching everything fall away, and then it just takes you all the way. It's pretty cool. Yeah, and I was struck by the word tyranny of experience too. I mean, we have often referred to, like, oh my gosh, the way he crafts words, like he you know, Rupert just like so meticulous about the words that he finds, and it made me, you know, reflect on tyranny. And tyranny seems like absolute rule, right? It's like and when the I am does seem to become a thing, you know, identity, that is like absolute rule. That is how the I am gets lost, you know. It's like how there is a seemingly separate self, and that word tyranny was like really instructive. It was like, oh yeah, just how like sort of it touches everything, you know, like every part of our experience of life becomes this seemingly separate self. Like, that's fact. Oh yeah, absolutely, I'm this person in this house sitting in this chair, you know. It's like, oh yeah, oh yep, everything like is touched by that. And the word tyranny really like impacted me in like, oh yeah, you know, like how completely we get lost, but even at the same time we're never lost, you know. We can't get lost, like there's no getting lost, but the illusion is complete. The illusion of being lost is complete, because we're so convinced, so utterly convinced. And there's something else that I wanted to say, unless somebody else wants to. I was going to change topics now. Anybody else want to chime in on that paragraph?
Just that when I read the tyranny of experience, I don't quite see experience itself as tyrannical. It's for me, it reads particularly as when we define ourselves by experience, and when we find ourselves doing that as a matter of practice, it's this tyrannical intellect which grabs hold and seeks to possess experience. And to me, that's like the tyranny of identification with the intellect.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to, that really stood out to me from this section is at the top of 115. I is the divine name, and each of us calls ourselves I. God has given us his name to remind us that our self is his self. So that piece about God has given us his name, like it was like, well, God didn't give us his name. You know, it was like, that's not a literal statement. God didn't like, okay, you're I and you're I and you're I, you know, like, and so then I was like, okay, what does that, what does he mean by that? Like, what's he referring to? And that just coalesced to me in the insight of like the way Rupert has referred to it before in the book is like, I is the name that whoever knows themselves gives to themselves. So God gave us the knowing of self, and it just, the way that he put it as God has given us his name, it just brought about the insight in a different way, because we name ourselves I, we call ourselves I because we know ourselves. We have to have the capacity to know ourselves in order to call ourselves I. And it just like, it was, again, I don't know, just really appreciating the way that he kind of says the same thing with all these different words and all these different ways of saying it. But it was like, God didn't give me that name. Oh, but God did give me that name. Like it just, I was able to see it from a different lens because God gave me God's knowing of myself. And then it was like, oh, like it just hit me. It was like, oh, wow. I get it. I get it. So I just really appreciate that part in the way that he spoke it.
When you consider that God gave you the knowing of I am, is that,
Yeah.
do you not then wonder if by saying that sentence you're making God another thing that has given something to you?
Yeah. I mean, semantically, yes, but that doesn't feel like the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I do think that there's more, you know, there's farther that I can go into it because I don't have the experience that God gave myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so yes. Yeah. Yes and
No, sorry, I don't mean to tie semantic knots either, because you know we can stupefy ourselves doing that into not saying anything.
Yeah.
That paragraph to me reminds me of an experience I had, which I think I may have shared before, and take it with a big chunk of salt. I once had what I suspect was a transcendental experience of being a tree, and and then a cow, I think, after that. And the experience was, for the tree, it was tree. I was just this continuous impulse of tree, and the cow was cow, 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 cow in a particular pattern. And that makes me suspect that they're both going I, and I, colored by the nature of being a tree. And so that makes me think about the term I in the same way as a human, which might only make sense to me. But it's like, it seemed to me like trees and cows and everything are all calling themselves I, but they're not naming themselves I. They just is I.
That's interesting, William. What you those last two words you just said, is I. What I was feeling called to like connect with what you're saying is like, if I were to have to put word, of course they don't, trees and cows don't say words, but if I was to put a word to what I imagine they are experiencing, it's is. And what's unique between cows and trees and humans is I. I think it shifts from is to I. And you just said it. You just made you're like, is I, which is fascinating.
I'm so glad you connected on that. Cool.
I have read that trees communicate. I've read some very interesting research on they do. They go through the root system, through the ground, they communicate with each other. And there's certain ways that trees embody that communication. But I was thinking too, while William was talking, like Caroline is the name that I put on in this experience of Earth School. I have to have a name. We all have a name. But to rise above the Caroline into the I am presence as my divine name, that's kind of like my Caroline's the lower three chakras, you know. And then as I move up into the heart and the throat and the third eye chakra, I am the I am. And I am that I am when I get to the crown chakra. But I think of Caroline as just this label that's necessary for being in Earth School. But I rest in the knowing my true name. The name above all other names is I am. Yeah.
Maybe it is. It just has the shape of Caroline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does seem to me as though like there's so many things that are true at the same time. And it seems as though there's some level of truth to an individualization of experience beyond the body, I think. There's still like a soul, so yeah, it's interesting to hear. Like it's almost as though you call the body Caroline. I mean, you didn't say it that way. You said the lower three chakras, but yeah, and the naming of an individualized perspective, obviously is important, or helpful, because otherwise, like, William and Aaron and I would be like, okay, so you with the glasses and the longer hair, you could just said or whatever, like, but it's helpful to be able to have something to refer to one another as, or like, when you're not around, like, where's the one who sometimes wears glasses, whatever, like, it's helpful to be able to refer to, to all have like a mental concept that matches that we refer to. Yeah, it's interesting.
See, but each of us have a name, like Aaron and William and BJ. But I look at that as like separation consciousness. And when we rise into the I am presence, we're all I am. And that is such a beautiful non-duality oneness concept to me, or principle, whatever I want to call it. But each of us has a name. We're separate. When we rise into I am, It's oneness. It's unity consciousness. Because we all have the same name.
Yeah, I agree with you, Caroline. And I just feel called to represent the perspective that, like, I believe there are third density planetary experiences where the life that evolves there doesn't choose to call themselves by names, by vibratory sound complexes. There's no naming.
Mm-hmm.
However, in those experiences, what I imagine is that we each still have our unique essence. We still carry our unique gift, our unique song, our unique, like, even if we didn't have names right now, if we didn't have, the four of us didn't have unique names, we still would be showing up in this conversation and this connection with a unique perspective and a unique set of biases or whatever. That is so beautiful. It's like, it's so purposeful to be individuated. It's the whole gift of third density, is to sort of carry this simultaneous essential truth that we are God, we are the one, and we have chosen to specify some portion of that infinite capacity and be something. It's specific. So it's a both and. I'm not at all challenging that we all are God, but there is, I just feel called to represent, like, the beauty of, like, being named, whether or not we actually name ourselves, just being named, being this unique essence.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting too is, like, you're both kind of like, sometimes I think of the metaphor of, like, okay, we're all on a mountain and we're scattered around the mountain. And some of us are at the base of the mountain and some of us are a little higher up, but we're, like, all around the mountain. We're all headed to the peak, right? But everyone's path, even though we're going the same place, our path to get to the same place looks different. And so anyway, I just kind of experienced that, exchange as, like, well, Caroline's path, like, her way up is like, I am, and we all are, and yep. And Aaron's path is like, yeah, and diversity of experience. And it's just like, that's cool.
Right.
We're all headed back to the one, and the way we get there looks different.
Yeah, and I also think that, like, I will eventually, either I have already or I will eventually occupy Caroline's position on the mountain.
Yeah.
We each get a turn to, like, because it's not, we don't just stand there in the mountain. We're all traveling to the peak.
Yeah.
And I'll get to stand where Caroline's standing, and we'll all get to stand where each other's standing.
Yeah. That's beautiful. This is such a great conversation, a conscious conversation. I'm really enjoying this.
Me too. We should record it.
But each one of our human expressions, I believe I've learned so very much from the gift of soul community, of other spiritual wanderers, So we have this human experience that lends us the capability to share experience and learn and grow from one another in navigating this experience of Earth, this Earth plane. So it is very helpful. But I used to really put a lot of importance on my name as Caroline. And less of that matters to me now. That's just where I am. Excuse me. Just the path at hand. But
if you're attempting to locate the I am, that is Caroline. There she is.
A geocaching coordinator. Yeah.
And maybe the idea is more to let go of the importance of being Caroline and not throw Caroline out as the baby with the bathwater necessarily. I really appreciate how you what you articulated, Aaron. That was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, all y'all.
I associate my personal name with all the roles and identities that are wrapped up in this experience that we share, or I share with the world. And I used to place a lot of importance and value on that. So my name was Caroline, and this is what I am. I am a teacher. I am a fill in the blank, XYZ. And that whole lane, all those lanes have merged into this one single lane of, yeah, I have all those things. I do all those. When I'm in doership, which is a necessity in this experience. But it's interesting how the roles have all gone away in terms of importance and what really matters in the infinite spectrum of the universe. It's just I am. Got real narrow.
It's
So
interesting language
inspiring where
that
you're
you
at,
use.
Caroline. I just want to say it's so beautiful to me to witness like what you shared in your check-in and what you're sharing right now is so beautiful to me. It's like really, really inspires me.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. And like the paradox, like they're both valuable. Like the specificity of Caroline and everything that all the roles that represents, and the one who knows she's beyond that are both here.
Yeah.
They're both important. They're both part of the game. They're both part of the story.
Yes. I'm so thankful for this moment to be here with you all. I learned so much from this community. This community is a beautiful gift to humanity. So thank you.
Thank
I
you.
listened to Wayne Dyer's meditation on I am today to prepare for this, and took me back to a very early time in my journey. But he really unpacks that nicely in the I am meditation by Wayne Dyer.
You want to share that on our thread?
Yeah, I will. It has the infinity symbol. That's it in the picture.
Cool.
But he explains very nicely in like lay terms what this really means, and how, and going in breath work, and then the music, the score that's with this is incredible.
Nice.
Yeah, I will share that.
Cool. Well, I think let's hear from you, William, and then let's keep reading.
Oh, no, I'm
Seemed like
good.
you were trying
Thank
to
you.
say something a couple times, no?
No, I'm good. But just very quickly, and not to pull the conversation backward at all, when you mentioned the podcast you were listening to, the girl that reads that, she doesn't happen to have an Australian accent, does she?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. I know who you're talking
Yeah,
about.
you do.
Fantastic. Slows it down to the perfect pace. Beautiful.
Right?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I'll make a note to share that on the thread too.
Yeah, I don't know who she
That'll be a
is.
good one to share, BJ. That's awesome.
Yeah. I
100%.
think the podcast is called Wisdom of the Masters or something like that, but I'll share it.
Yep.
I found it on YouTube. It's got a strange name. I'll share the YouTube channel as well.
Right. It's two nuns and they have a hermitage, and their purpose is to read the mystical wisdom of all these different masters, right? Like that's kind of like
Yeah.
the primary thing.
It is
so
such a gift.
It's such a gift.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, cool.
So anybody want to read the second section?
I can read.
Thanks.
Okay. Do not allow the name I to become personalized by thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. Do not allow it to be tarnished by experience. Become accustomed to taking refuge from your thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, and simply resting in being as being. We cannot really rest in being because we already are being. So rest knowingly as your essential being, independent of whatever experience may be present. Our own being is closer to us than our breath, closer to us than our most intimate thoughts and feelings. In fact, it is not close to us, it is us. We cannot find it. We can only be it knowingly. We cannot lose it. We can only overlook it. Rest as that. Do not take refuge in a teaching, a situation, or a relationship. Take refuge in yourself. If we are unhappy or feel any sense of lack, Instead of seeking to fulfill our longing, we should seek the source of our longing. The source of our longing is I, myself, the one who is unhappy. If we go deeply into that sense of I, we will, either gradually or suddenly, be divested of the limitations we have acquired from experience, and that for which we were in search will be revealed as our very own self. The I that longs is a coloring of the I that is longed for. Divested of this coloring, it is revealed as the true and only I of infinite awareness, God's presence. As Ramana Maharshi said, when the I is divested of the I, only I remains.
Let's open up for discussion.
When I read that last sentence that was just shared with the Ramana Maharshi, when the I is divested of the I, only I remains. It's like this infinite, I come back to this infinite loop. I just keep seeing this infinity. It's like portals. I kind of think of like my final breath on this plane will be the first in breath of the next incarnation. It's just flow.
Yeah.
But I love how what I started as the I at birth, I come back to at death, and then again in the next incarnation, so on and so on. So anyway, it just points to an infinity loop to me.
I've been seeing an infinity loop a lot recently too, and it's interesting. Like you weren't even in closing circle at 40S, but I referred to like I did a little guided meditation thought experiment kind of thing, like feeling the movement of the planet. And as I was feeling it, it felt like a figure eight. Like even though like the Earth doesn't seem to make a figure eight around the sun, yeah, it's interesting. Like the image of the infinity loop has been present for me a lot too.
Yeah, that's why I have it's upside down. But this was because of Ra.
Oh wow!
When I first read The Law of One, I wanted a tattoo that reminded me of the love of the infinite creator.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And that's why I have this. Yeah, I got that quite a long time ago, but it's just
Cool.
Yeah, the infinity loop. Yeah, I remember
That's
going
cool.
to a tattoo artist and go, I need you to draw me a sketch that reminds me of the love of the infinite creator, and this is what we came
That's
up
cool.
with. Yeah, but I love infinity loops. I have another one on my back. It's like, yeah, just I becomes I is always I. It's just this, I don't know, it's just beautiful.
There's a symmetry throughout all this language, which is essentially shaped like that. It's the basis of so many koans and different ways of pointing to truth. I had a little flash, and it's perhaps a bit abstracted, but you might appreciate this, Aaron. And it needs to be in language, so I've written it in the chat. I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to talk about, but I feel called to express it in the moment. Around the sentence, the I that longs is a coloring of the I that is longed for. Plug and play for Walter Russell with Hot and Cold.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the movement of hot into cold and cold into hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the
a little-
formless that longs is a coloring of the form that is longed for. The form that longs is the coloring of the formless that is longed for.
That's right. Exactly.
The opposites long for. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've said this a bunch of times in different contexts of our study groups, but I'm a very visual thinker. Like a lot of times when we're talking in my mind, a lot of the words we're reading are forming pictures. And even BJ, when you were talking about the metaphor of the mountain and that we all are, we're all standing around and spread around the mountain. A mountain is a cone. A cone is is one half of the torus. The torus is the infinity symbol. The infinity symbol turned on its side is the bindu point with the circle. I mean, it's all like depictions of these movements that the creator makes to manifest its infinite thought into reality. Anyway, so I'm like having all these visual insights during tonight's conversation. But the mountain being the cone was new for me. I've never, right, the mountain and the cone. And I mean the cone in the way that Walter Russell talks about the cone. And then for me, that insight brought me to like, oh, right, when you were talking about the mountain, BJ, they were each dispersed around around the mountain. And we are seeking the pinnacle of the mountain. What is the pinnacle of the mountain? In Walter Russell's teaching, it is the maturing of form. It's the arrival at the idea that exists in the infinite mind of God, but brought into form in perfection. And that's constantly happening. And once it happens, then it begins the journey back into dispersal, back into space, and it goes away. That's been going on forever, and it will continue forever. Anyway, just like feeling very inspired by our conversation.
So the mountain
the glow is happening.
So the mountain is downward spiraling rock. What, downward spiraling infinite rockness?
Well, all motion is always two ways, so it's downward and upward.
Rockness.
Yes, but
yeah. But I'm saying, anyway, awesome, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that the way it goes? Like according to Rod, I remember Matthias de Stefano talking about this. Like you get through all these octaves, and then you get to that place of the all that is, and then don't you like start over? Doesn't this? You work your way through all of these layers, all these octaves, I call it. It's like notes. But when you get to that pinnacle, I suppose not even where Ra or Quo are, maybe past that. You just merge into the sun.
Right.
You become part of the sonship. So they're not there yet. Yeah, they're not there yet, right?
Right.
I like sonship's cool.
SON, SHIP, and SUN, SHIP. I like them both. Sonship.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we merge into the sun, but then we disperse again, yes? At some point, our souls begin another journey.
Right. The creator's dual desires continue. So yeah.
Right.
We don't rest then as the formless. We want to go back to form.
Yeah.
Well, and the mystics say, the mystics through time have said that like it never began and it will never end. Like it's like so beyond our capacity to talk about. Like it's not like okay, so we're in some octave, we're in some galactic experience, we're in some solar experience, we're in some planetary experience, inside of some universal cosmic experience, which is the next iteration from the prior cosmic experience, but it never began and it will never end.
Right.
Somehow, it's like, what?
Right.
I love that Rupert's beautiful grounded telling of these mystical doorways it is such a powerful I mean, here we are, like, you know, we're all like having our own experience of these deep currents of, you know, touching into the truth of what's really going on here. And I just love how like Rupert does it in such a down to earth kind of way. Anyway, like we're getting, from my perspective, we're getting into these sort of like deep discussions about these very primal movements of the creator, of God, and of I am, and what that does through such simple telling.
Totally. Isn't that just his magic? Like, it's so attenuated and ethereal and like at the edges of our reach of experience, and yet it's so simple.
Right.
Salt of the earth.
And
Boom.
the thing we got,
how do you do that? He's like both sides of the paradox at the same time.
And good on us for having a crack at it.
Yeah.
A crack at it. I like that.
Good on us. Well, and I
As
wanted
we
to
say in
say,
Australia.
the thing that got my attention about that last portion we just wrote was in the statement, take refuge in yourself. Do not take refuge in a teaching, a situation, in a relationship, and any of these ideas, any of these words that we're sharing with each other. That's
any
not
idea
it.
of a future, you're never going to get there. No.
It's so intimate. It's so like accessible and safe. You know, like, I don't know, like there's lots of, but like, take refuge in yourself. Don't trust me. Don't trust BJ. Don't trust Rupert.
No, you can trust me.
Trust
No,
Rob.
I'm just kidding.
You know, just
I
like
hope
go
so.
there, go into yourself and take refuge in what you're made of. It's like, it's so good. So
Again,
good.
it's a word that I've not put together in spiritual context. Tyranny, refuge, these were words that gave me a new sense of awareness, a new interesting thing to chew on. But yeah, refuge. I think of refuge as like my salvation, you know, it's where I go for cover. And we are always looking for that salvation in the next big thing, or what feels oddly familiar or comfortable, whatever. But I like that term refuge. I thought, oh, that speaks to me.
Me too.
I've sought refuge in so many things external that have never ever brought an ounce of peace.
Yes. Yeah.
Never.
Yeah. And he said it earlier in this section too. Become accustomed to taking refuge from your thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, and simply rest in being as being. Yeah, it stood out for me too. It's like, oh, take refuge. Oh, okay, yes, and I love that, you know, because it's like that's what meditation is, but then it's like that makes meditation seem more like a doing, you know. And he has referred to like meditation isn't what we do, it's what we are. And I feel like just that phrase, take refuge in yourself, points to what he's talking about. Like meditation is what you are. Take refuge in yourself. That is meditation. It's like, wow, it's so good. It's so good.
I think we equate refuge with safety. And the ego is always looking to keep us safe. It's always, that's its fallback, its default is to keep us safe. So we seek refuge in relationships and money and, you know, work and whatever else. So I thought that was a very apropos term that I had not pondered. And I'm glad it came up.
Me too.
Mad respect to Rupert Spira.
Mad respect, yo.
Yeah.
Totally.
Carolyn, you want to read our next section?
Yeah, sure. When I was at boarding school in England, we used to sing a hymn in chapel every Sunday evening. God be in my head and in my understanding. God be in my eyes and in my looking. God be in my mouth and in my speaking. God be in my heart and in my thinking. God be at my end and at my departing. As much as I loved the hymn, little did I realize at the time that the self in myself is God's being. The simple feeling of being, or the knowledge I am, is God's presence in us, as us. Do not allow I to become personal or finite. If a thought or feeling arises on behalf of a personal self, or an activity or relationship is initiated in its service, pause and investigate. Hold up the mirror of understanding. The personal self cannot stand the bright light of awareness. Allow it to come to an end and understanding. In this way, our lives cease serving and perpetuating the fears, desires, and anxieties that characterize the separate self or ego, and begin to express, share, and celebrate the qualities of peace, love, joy, justice, and compassion that are innate in our essential nature. Oops. Yeah, that's it.
Let's discuss.
Well, that prayer sticks out to me a little bit in a language sense. And, I will re-clarify that my interest in language is not about words and communication so much as I tend to see patterns in two-dimensional information. So there's shape that I'm observing. And something that stood out to me that I've highlighted to have a look back is that there's constancy in the prayer between eyes looking, mouth speaking, and departing. I found it, I feel like there is something to be gleaned from head and understanding and heart and thinking. Like, why heart and thinking? I wonder.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's a pattern in there that probably speaks something quite juicy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those seemed perhaps reversed to me. Like the heart is sort of an understanding function in terms of understanding another self, or offering understanding, like it's acceptance or something, and head is more thinking. But yeah, it's interesting. My head and in my understanding, my heart and in my thinking.
I had an
Yeah, I'm
interesting,
not sure what I don't quite get there, but I'm going to go back and look over it.
well, I was
Sorry,
thinking
Caroline.
on this. No, you're fine. I should have asked if you were done. I had this beautiful download in my meditation this morning, and it was like God was speaking to me. Caroline, I open the eyes of your heart is what I heard. Open the eyes of your heart. So I thought to myself, I say often, I will to see with Christ's vision. I will to see the light in this world. And so now it's gone to open the eyes of your heart. I don't know. I've really been pondering that, and it took me back when I read that hymn.
Yeah.
But I don't know, coming from a long storied history of Christian life, sometimes I weep for these hymns that I used to sing that were so grounded in ego, and we'd say always, help me find the peace that surpasses all understanding. That was just a Christian mantra over and over again. There's no peace in this religion. But I get a little prickly sometimes. Like, I know there's so much beauty when I look at that hymn from a higher mind, a higher perspective. And so maybe that's still a wound I'm working on, is to let go of all those notions of what Christianity was like. It's like unprogramming from a cult. It's been a long history, but the last line was sad to me. God be at my end and at my departing, because we were led to believe the end of this life is the end of all life. You just get one shot, and then you got to hope you get into heaven. It's very, very, very limiting. So I thought, there is no departing. There never has been a departing. It's just all a beautiful flow of beginning and coming back to self. So anyway, I'm probably going in a random tangent, but I'm finding Christian hymns in a very different light. I won't be singing anything about the lamb that was slain as Christ and all that stuff, but that last line right there just took me right back to this childhood of, oh, I have one life, please spare me at the end. I hope I get into heaven. And the first thing I told my pastor when I woke up was, heaven is in me. I said, the kingdom of heaven is within me. And Jesus said that. It's within you. It's here now. Eternity is right now. That's what I told him. So anyway, beautiful little hymn. And he also has a Christian background, but do not allow the I to become personal or finite. And I think when I say I am Caroline, I am limiting that omniscient quality of the immortal self. And I like that he said that. I'm being very aware of when I use the word I now, and I'm appreciating that from this book, to be mindful of when I comes into my language and my verbiage, and to keep it sacred and to keep it holy. Yeah.
And to allow it to point us back to the awareness that we are. That's what's been alive for me. It's like, what is it that's meant by I? You know, there's like this, you know, not to point to the body necessarily, but like, oh, right, I, the experience of I, yeah. Yeah, and then the thing you said about eyes, open the eyes of your heart, that pinged for me. Like I had a friend talking about a similar thing the other day of like, you know, there's times where we walk into the kitchen and there's like dishes everywhere and it's like, dishes and the crusty and, you know, or whatever, like you got to wipe the counters or whatever. There's times where it's like, oh, and then there's times like where we have the same experience of like the dishes and the counter or whatever, and there's just there's like, oh, like there's just the experience of isness, you know, like look at the perfection of these dishes and like I get to experience this life with these people putting their dishes on the counter. Like there's just, yeah, that's what came to me was like my friend having said that, like we all have these experiences of the problems, you know, that we could call problems are still there, but they're not seen as problems. They're these little gifts, even if it's like a dirty dish on the counter. It's like, look at that perfect dish and the sunlight slanting in through the window and hitting it and the dust motes. And, you know, it's just like, anyway, that's what came to me when you said, open the eyes of your heart, like see through those eyes.
Yeah.
William.
I just remembered a saying that I've been wanting to share for ages. The only problem is thinking that a problem is a problem and wishing otherwise.
Yeah.
A Course in Miracles says there are no problems. They beat this into you. You have no problems. You have one problem, and it's all about separation. It's like you're not aligned with spirit. There are no problems when you're aligned with spirit. Problems are projections or perceptions. I used to really have a hard time with that one, but I see the beauty in that wisdom. There are
I
no
have a
problems.
quote here somewhere. Oh, I used to have it on my desktop. Well, I'll share it in the group.
Can I say a thing while you're looking for it?
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say I can't find it right now, but well, yeah, I'll post it later because I can't remember it exactly. So you go ahead, and then I also want to keep us reading soon.
Well, I just wanted to say something that kind of, you know, synergizes what I heard from different pieces I heard from each of you. Seeing through the eyes of the heart. When I heard you say that, Caroline, or I don't know if I got the phrase right, but however it was you put it, that you got that insight. What pinged for me was find love in the moment, which is kind of like the confederation, like the perennial confederation suggestion of like how to be with life is just find love in the moment, which is seeing through the eyes of the heart. Like they're synonymous. And I also think it's this, I think that gesture of finding love in the moment is the same thing as being aware of the I am. Like, I think this whole book, this whole teaching that Rupert's giving is like finding love in the moment, like being able to become aware of, the impersonal I am, like the universal I am, like everything we've been reading about this whole book. I think it's exactly synonymous with finding love in the moment. And that's an insight that I had, a few weeks ago. I think BJ and I were talking about I don't know, something, one of the many things. It was either about this teaching or about Ra or something. And it was just like, oh, I think the direct path, the practice of divesting from attachment to experience and identity, and like becoming aware of awareness itself and the bliss that's available there, the peace and the happiness that's available there, seems to me to be the fundamental gesture of being able to find love in the moment. Like it's the same thing. It's like the essence of finding love in the moment. So anyway, I was just wanting to share that.
Yeah. I found my quote too. I put it in the chat. If you see anything except the face of love, you are having difficulties with perception. Cool. And William put in, the moment is love. All right, I'm going to read our last section.
Okay.
And this will be the end of the book.
No.
Here we go, countdown. The knowledge I am is infinite consciousness shining in each of our finite minds. The feeling of being myself is God's presence pervading our hearts. I is the divine name in each of us. Every time we think or say I, we may follow it, like Ariadne's golden thread, to the luminous being that not only lies behind all experience, although it is often found there first, but shines in the midst of all experience and is all experience. In the knowledge I, or the simple experience of being myself, the peace and happiness for which we long above all else can be found quietly shining. To feel that our essential being is shared with all others is love. It is the means by which conflicts between individuals, communities, and nations may be resolved. The recognition that we share our being with all things places us in harmony with nature and will thereby restore humanity's relationship with the planet. The knowledge of being must, as such, be the foundation of any truly civilized society. All that is necessary is to go to the feeling of being myself, or the thought I am, and sink deeply into it. All that we truly long for lives there, and in the depths of our being. If we turn towards it, it will take us into itself.
I would have ended this book with his first sentence. That's very impactful to me. The knowledge I am is infinite consciousness shining in each of our finite minds.
Yeah.
That is the calling, to go from this finite mind of ours to infinite consciousness. So anyway, I really like that, resonate with that sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think as a spiritual being, I long for that. Remembering a place I never left, journey without a destination, but a place I've never left. It's really the pinnacle of existence.
Yeah, I resonate with that longing. And I've also been playing with like partly inspired by this book, being with the longings and recognizing the longings as love. Like, rather than it's a longing for something and I need to get the thing. It's like, oh, the longing is also the having, because the longing is love. And because it's love, it's love, it's the experience of having what you love, like when I look at each of you, like if I love you, it's because you're there. Like, it's like, oh, I love you, it's like, so yeah, I resonate with that longing and the fulfillment of the longing at the same time. I think that's something that I've been reminding myself of, like, yeah, the longing is also fulfilled.
For each longing, find the corresponding having or
Can you
finding.
say it again? To reach
For
having.
each longing,
Oh,
for each longing,
uh,
find the corresponding having.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find it so
sorry,
compelling that
no,
we all, as different embodiments of human experience, have these interests and all of this stuff, but yet in spirituality there is this single sort of this single road, this place of home that we long for and know is there. It's just like I could meet somebody anywhere on the planet who understands spirituality and has that same drive. It's just, that just blows my mind when I really think about it. We're all different people in many ways, but yet in this particular framework, the focus is that I am. It is universal. In consciousness, it is universal.
Yeah. Either of you want some closing remarks, Aaron or William?
I just had a really interesting idea about Ariadne's golden thread, but if we're running out of time, then I can distill
we're
that and share
technically
it elsewhere.
at the end of our time frame, but yeah, let's go. Well, this is our last week. Let's finish it out right.
Well, I hope I don't butcher this, but I got a flash of something that I've been wanting to learn to consider in a particular way. This, how might I go about recognizing that I'm an aperture of the infinite, and so when I use the word I, use it as such. How can I do that without completely negating my own personal experience? Is there kind of a way to consider it? And this idea of forming a thread between I and the place of stillness just kind of came up really vividly for me. And I imagined that rather than monitoring the way I say I, just remember the golden thread that's connected to the infinite. And then I can use I, but then it's kind of on a leash.
Yeah.
And not in a possessive way, but it's like, okay, my I can go travel around in experience for a certain distance, but as long as it's connected via this thread to the infinite, it doesn't go too far.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like that. And when it resonates for me, like in terms of sometimes when I think I did it in today's meditation, like sometimes when I'm in that place of stillness, there's like a repatterning that I practice. It's like, this is I. This is I. Okay, now we can add other things back on, but don't lose track.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Like, don't let it run amok in a shopping center and spill stuff all over itself,
Right.
and dress itself in clothes and come back with a story that you've got to unwind.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's like it's almost like it's more free. Like then you can really let it out to play, once it's like, once I know, there I am. Okay. Now let's go wild.
Totally.
Anything you'd like to share, Aaron?
I did have a little response, Caroline, to what you said about, just the way that you're touched about realizing that if you encounter anyone who who is orienting to the spiritual path, and I forget how you said it, but that it's so universal, and there's a way that there's this way that we can connect. I mean, it's the only thing there is to orient to. It's just that some people are doing it through the conscious mind, and some people are doing it, rather sloppily through the subconscious mind or something. But all there is to orient to is the spiritual path. That's all that's happening is the I. All that's happening is us, Oh, I liked what you said, William, the aperture of the I am, or the aperture of the infinite. I forget how you said it, but the aperture. We're all just occupying this aperture. We're all just repping this unique perspective. We're all just taking on this individualized node of the infinite. And we're waking up to it more and more. And I do see that, in the world. I do see that there's a profound awakening happening. There's a profound acceleration of people who are bringing into the conscious mind, bringing in what's actually going on the planet into their conscious process. And it's really exciting. And even if they're not, you still can connect, like we can still connect with anybody in the world because everyone's in the same path. And if we know that, then that's our, that's sort of like our doorway into, whatever. Knowing that we're in community, knowing that we're on the same path, whether we know it or not. It's beautiful. It's very beautiful. So thank you all for bringing such inspiring. Yeah, it's been a really inspiring reading and session and discussion tonight. Feeling very.
I have enjoyed
enriched.
It. Yeah, me too. Me too.
Totally. Thank you all.
I know. So being myself is gonna just lay dormant for a while or something.
Yeah. Well, this is the end of this study group. I need to I want to turn my attention to inquiring together, and I don't currently personally have the bandwidth for holding two offerings a week. But I do feel excited about reading another and studying another Rupert book again at some point. So I would like to bring that out again at some point, but maybe when I have a little more bandwidth, or if someone else wanted to hold, a Rupert study group, we're definitely, Aaron and I are not necessarily, trying to hold ourselves as the only people who make offerings to the collective. So there's that possibility as well.
Well, I greatly appreciate I wouldn't have read this book otherwise, and to get to
Mm.
share it in community of like-minded souls is a beautiful thing. So this container's been lovely. I thank you.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you all
Me
too.
too. Thank you, BJ, so much for guiding us through
Yeah.
this,
Mm.
Yeah.
giving us the gift of having this shared experience.
You're welcome.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks for joining me on the ride.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Love
That's
y'all.
great.
And see you soon. Not in this container, but I'll see you all soon.
Yep.
That's
Mwah.
true.
Awesome.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, y'all.
Have a good day, William.
I love how
Thank
you say
you.
that.
I
And
know I have to wish him a good day as we're going into
We're going
the
to
evening.
bed.
and if I don't catch you later, good morning, good evening, and good night.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.